the world compressed to the ringing in her ears. Dust, tasting of concrete and cordite, coated her tongue. Her left eye, pressed to the rubber cup of the optic, was dry. The right eye watered from the acrid smoke filling the crawlspace. Koshka, DV Zviozdi, 2 stars, 200 meters, blue structure. Lynx's voice was a damaged rasp over the radio, digitized by static. PID confirmed. He's static. Send it. Her breath fogged the glass. A bead of sweat traced a path from her hairline, stinging the cut above her brow. The crosshairs were perfect, a clean intersection of mathematics and intent, resting just below the collarbone of the man in the gray uniform. The man giving the orders. The trigger felt impossibly heavy, the 2.1 kilograms of pressure required to break the shot. Send it. Her thumb brushed the windage turret. A calculation clicked, not about the wind, but about the other shadow detaching itself from the gas truck behind the target. A shadow with no rank insignia, but one who held the map. The crosshairs drifted 1 centimeter to the right. Not him. The other one. 96 hours earlier, forward operating base Kraken, the cold was a physical weight. It pressed through the Kevlar, through the fleece, through the thermal layer, until it found her bones. Sergeant Olena Kovalenko, Koshka, moved by centimeters. This was the gray zone, a 2-kilometer stretch of frozen mud and skeletal trees that belonged to no one and consumed everyone. Her world was the anti-glare coating of her night vision optic, a pale green hell of shattered brick and concertina wire. Beside her, 3 paces back, was Lynx, Corporal Petrenko. He was new, his movements too quick, too sharp. He was noise. Koshka moved like smoke, pouring herself from one patch of darkness to the next. Her mission objective: establish a covert overwatch position in the ruins of the Azot chemical plant. Her real objective: wait. She held up a gloved fist. Lynx froze. Koshka knelt, her knee sinking into the slurry of snow and ash. She tasted the air, iron, wet concrete, something chemical, long dead. She scanned the ridge 200 meters ahead, the last open ground before the factory wall. Nothing. No thermal signatures, no movement. But something felt wrong. The silence was too heavy. Show, don't tell. She didn't tell Lynx she was uneasy. She unclipped her wire cutters from her belt. Lynx's voice was a whisper in her earpiece, already tight with strain. No heat, Koshka. We're clear. She ignored him. She crawled forward, the 22 kilograms of her pack and rifle dragging at her shoulders. She brushed the snow away with her glove. There. A filament, thin as a spider's web, stretched 10 centimeters above the ground. A trip flare. Lynx had walked right over it. Her anger was cold, focused. She didn't waste it on him. She simply cut the wire. The snap of the metal was deafening. She held her breath, counting. 1. The wind whistled through a broken pipe. 2. A distant artillery shell rumbled miles away. 3. Nothing. She rose, a shadow detaching from other shadows, and continued. This was the discipline. This was the quiet part of the job nobody understood. It wasn't the shot. The shot was physics, a simple, violent equation. The job was this: the hours and days of agonizing patience, the meticulous, thankless crawl. They reached the factory wall. A breach, dark and gaping, waited. Koshka slid through it, her rifle barrel leading. The air inside was different, thicker. It smelled of mold and pigeons. They climbed. 4 floors. Lynx, clumsy in the dark, kicked a loose shell casing. It tink-tink-tinked down the concrete stairs. Koshka stopped, pressing herself into the alcove, her hand on her sidearm. She forced her breathing to slow. Listen. Don't just hear. Only the wind. Their OP was a corner office, its outer wall blasted away. It offered a perfect, dominating view of the crossroads below. Koshka laid out her pig mat, a thin, insulated pad, on the rubble-strewn floor. She unzipped the drag bag. The rifle emerged, a .338, heavy, cold, and perfect. She assembled the bipod, the suppressor, the optic. Each click was precise, muted, practiced. Lynx set up his spotting scope and the SIGINT receiver. He was still breathing too fast. OP established. Koshka, I have movement, north side. Koshka settled behind the rifle. She didn't look through the scope yet. She used her binos, scanning the entire area. The movement was just a stray dog. She finally pressed her eye to the optic. The glass was cold. She adjusted the parallax. The world jumped into focus, a landscape of gray buildings, gray snow, and gray sky. We wait, she whispered. A Russian patrol vehicle, a Tiger, rolled past the crossroads below, its occupants oblivious, wrapped in a cocoon of diesel fumes and false safety. Koshka didn't even breathe. She just watched. She was a ghost. She was home. Daylight bled into the ruins, gray and unforgiving. It revealed the full scope of their hunting ground. The crossroads was a major logistics artery. Log, Koshka murmured, her voice flat, her eye pressed to the optic. Sentry, east corner, RPK, he's a smoker. Checks his phone every 4 minutes. Copy, Lynx mumbled. His pencil scratched against the data book. BTR-80, rolling stop at the checkpoint. 10 dismounts, ammunition resupply. Mark the crates, look for color codes. Got it. The first 6 hours were a deluge. The intel brief had promised intermittent activity. This was a hornet's nest. Koshka felt the familiar cold burn of frustration. The analysts in their warm bunkers saw maps. She saw the mud on the soldiers' boots, the way they huddled together for warmth, the sloppy discipline of the checkpoint guards. Intel was trash, Lynx whispered, his frustration audible. He was struggling to keep the log coherent. This is a staging area, not a checkpoint. How are we supposed to find one man in this? We don't find him, Koshka said. Her voice was low, hypnotic, a tool to calm him and herself. We find the pattern. We learn the rhythm. He will be the anomaly. He will be the break in the rhythm. She began the mental process, the part of the job that left scars no one saw. She detached. The men below ceased to be men. They became variables. Sentry East, Sentry West, BTR Crew A. She watched a young soldier, barely 18, drop a box of rations. He was yelled at by an officer. He looked tired. He looked like her cousin. Variable tired. Variable officer angry. She watched him for a full minute, cataloging his rifle, his posture, the lack of plates in his vest. No threat. 300 meters. The dehumanization was a cloak she pulled on, a necessary cold. It was the only way to endure the waiting, the only way to pull the trigger. Hours passed. The sun reached its weak zenith and began its cowardly retreat. The factory was a tomb of concrete and ice. They ate ration bars in silence, never moving from their positions. Koshka's muscles screamed. Her right eye ached from staring. This was the quiet fortitude. It was the discipline to stare at a patch of dirt for 18 hours. It was the mental strength to separate the critical data, the arrival of a water truck, from the emotional noise, the soldier crying as he read a letter. Koshka, Lynx said, his voice suddenly sharp. SIGINT. I've got a spike. High frequency, encrypted burst. Military grade. Koshka's focus snapped. She slid from the rifle, crawling to his position. The receiver's screen showed a tight, powerful signal. Directional. Bearing 040 coming from that blue 3-story. The one with the new antenna, Lynx said, pointing. It's close. As if summoned, Koshka's earpiece hissed. It wasn't Lynx, it was Sova, command. Koshka, Sova, stand by for traffic. The voice was thin, digitized. Intel update. High-value target confirmed active in your AO, codename GROM. Authorization is high, mission parameters updated. Recon is now secondary. HVT elimination is primary. A pause. ROE update. Positive identification required for engagement. I repeat, PID is mandatory. Acknowledge. Koshka pressed the transmit button. Koshka copies. HVT primary? PID mandatory? The line clicked dead. Koshka and Lynx stared at each other. The entire mission had changed. The stakes had just escalated from observation to assassination. Grom, Lynx breathed. They're serious. Koshka returned to her rifle. The frustration with the bad intel was gone, replaced by a chilling clarity. The noise, the chaos, the overwhelming numbers, it all made sense. They were here for him. The encrypted signal spiked again, stronger this time, from the same blue building. He's there, Koshka said. It wasn't a guess. Just then, Lynx raised his spotting scope. His voice was tight. Koshka, I have movement. Civilian vehicle approaching the crossroads. It was a black Lada, civilian plates caked in mud, but Koshka's eye caught the subtle, non-standard thickness of the windows. Armored. It rolled to a stop, idling arrogantly in the middle of the intersection. The checkpoint guards, so aggressive with the supply trucks, merely nodded. They were expecting it. Koshka, Lynx's voice was a low hum, electric with adrenaline. Look at this. Windows are thick. He's important. I see it, Koshka said. Her voice was level. Her focus was absolute. The passenger door opened. A man in a heavy black civilian coat emerged. He was tall, broad-shouldered. He matched Grom's physical profile. He pulled on a pair of gloves and looked up, directly at their ruined factory. Koshka's heart didn't beat faster. It seemed to slow, to push the blood through her veins with deliberate, cold strokes. That's him, Lynx hissed, his hands flying over his data book. Range 410 meters. Wind, half value from the left, 3 clicks. That's a 80% match to the intel photo. Koshka, I have the solution, requesting to send. Send it, the two most dangerous words. Koshka's finger was nowhere near the trigger. It rested, straight, along the stock. The crosshairs settled on the man's chest. He was talking to the checkpoint guards, gesturing with authority. He certainly looked like a polkovnik. Koshka, he's static, Lynx pushed, his voice rising. This is it. This is the shot. PID is strong. We take him. We RTB. Mission done. It's too easy. The thought was not a feeling. It was a calculation. An HVT of Grom's stature, responsible for a coming offensive, would not stand in the open in a contested crossroads. He would not arrive in a Lada, even an armored one. He would be surrounded by a minimum 4-man security detail, not 2 jumpy conscripts at a checkpoint. Look at his boots, Koshka murmured. What? His boots. Military issue, but worn. Laces are frayed. Now look at his gloves. The man clapped his hands together for warmth. The gloves were cheap, knitted wool, the kind you buy at a market, not the insulated, tactical gloves a high command officer would wear in 15-degree saksu. That's Koshka, that's thin. The face matches. The face is 80%. The details are 100% wrong. His security is 0. His equipment is mismatched. He's a prop, a stand-in. They're testing us. The man turned, his face clear in her optic for a full 5 seconds. It was a strong match. but the context was wrong. Her entire being, every hour of training, every scar from past mistakes, screamed that this was a trap, a lure to make the ghost fire, to reveal its position. "No shot," Koshka said. Her voice was final. "What?" "Koshka, we have authorization. We have PID." Lynx was frantic, his discipline cracking. He saw a target. She saw the system behind the target. "You have a description," Koshka corrected him, her tone dropping to ice. "You do not have positive identification. You have a lure. Stand down, Lynx. That is an order." The silence in their hide was absolute, broken only by the scrape of Lynx's pencil as he angrily jammed it back into his book. The tension was no longer just outside. It was in their concrete tomb, thick and toxic. On the crossroads, the man in the black coat finished his cigarette, ground it under his frayed boot, and got back in the Lada. The car performed a lazy U-turn and drove back the way it came. Lynx was vibrating with suppressed rage. You just let him walk. You let Grom walk. "That was not Grom," Koshka said. She didn't take her eye from the scope, scanning the windows of the surrounding buildings, hunting for the other sniper, the one who had been watching them. She felt nothing. No relief, no arrogance. Only the grim satisfaction of her own restraint. Her fortitude was not in her ability to make the shot, but in her strength to refuse it. An hour passed. The silence stretched. Then Lynx's SIGINT receiver beeped, a soft notification of a new data packet from Sova. He read it, his shoulders slumping. He didn't look at her. He just stared at the floor. "Intel update," he said, his voice hollow. "Local collaborator, Nightjar, used as a decoy. Frequently matches description of high-level officers. Used to bait sniper fire." He finally looked at her. The anger was gone, replaced by a new, unsettling respect. "You were right." "I know," Koshka said, her eye still on the scope. "Log the Lada. Note the armor. They're hunting us. Now we hunt them." The decoy Lada had been a gift. It told Koshka they were blind, fishing in the dark, but it also told her they were alert. The chaos of the crossroads was a distraction. The real work was happening in the blue structure, the 3-story administrative building where the HF signal had originated. Koshka's optic lived there now. She studied its windows, its guards, its crude sandbag reinforcements. For 12 hours, she simply watched. "I have him," she said. Lynx started. He had been dozing, a ball of cold misery. "Who? Grom?" "No, the nerve." Her crosshairs were steady on a second-floor window. It was smeared with grime and partially boarded up, but a 30-centimeter gap remained. Inside, a man in a headset moved back and forth. He was their radio operator, the source of the encrypted bursts. "The radio man," Lynx said, focusing his own scope. "He's behind glass, moving. We can't guarantee—" "I can." "Koshka, the ROE. States engage targets of opportunity if they provide a distinct military advantage. Silencing their C2 is the definition of advantage. It will force Grom to move. It will make him react. It will also tell them exactly where we are." Lynx countered, his voice logical but tight with fear. "They already know what we are," Koshka said. "They don't know where." Firing a single, suppressed, 338 round from a concrete shell of 1,000 broken windows, they will know the direction, not the source. We need to rattle the cage. She settled in. The shot was 430 meters. The variables flooded her mind. Angle, 5 degrees down, wind, negligible in this urban canyon. Target, moving, intermittent, and the glass. Glass was a monster. It deflected, it fragmented, it changed the entire ballistic equation. Koshka's thumb brushed the trigger guard. She felt it then, the ghost in her own machine. A faint, almost invisible tremor in her index finger. It was the memory of Kharkiv. A hurried shot, a bad calculation. The whoomp of the mortar tubes returning fire. The screams of her team. The smell of burning diesel and men. Not now. Not here. She exhaled, forcing the air from her lungs until they burned. She let the tremor happen, acknowledged it. It was fear. It was human. And it was unacceptable? She closed her eyes for 1 second. She was not Olena. She was Koshka, a cat, a predator that waited, that saw the variables, that acted without malice or hesitation. She opened her eyes. The tremor was gone. The operator inside the window stopped, his back to her, leaning over his console. He was static. "Spot me," she whispered. "Spotting," Lynx replied, his voice resigned to her will. Koshka's world compressed to the circle of her optic, the man's head, the grimy pane of glass. She held high, aiming for the man's upper spine, calculating the deflection. The crosshairs were rock steady. Her breath eased out. At the perfect still point between heartbeats, she pressed. The rifle thumped against her shoulder, a brutal, familiar comfort. The recoil was so well managed. Her eye never left the scope. She didn't watch the bullet. She watched the result. A spider web of cracks erupted on the window. A dark hole appeared. The man inside simply folded. He vanished from view. She was already cycling the bolt, the brass casing ejecting with a metallic click. Her eye wasn't on the window anymore. It was on the guards below. 1001. The crack of the sonic boom reached them. 1002. The guards looked up, confused. 1003. One pointed, shouting. "Target down!" Lynx breathed, his voice hollow with awe. "God, Koshka. Perfect shot." "Log their reaction," she ordered, her voice cold. She was already scanning for an escape route. "The OP is hot. Pack light. We move." The radio inside the blue structure had gone silent. But outside, the shouting began. Whistles blew, doors slammed. They had rattled the cage. The Hornets were coming. The first mortar shell landed 400 meters short. The whump was a deep, resonant cough that shook the concrete dust from the ceiling. "They're ranging us," Lynx hissed, his hands fumbling with the clips on his pack. "Koshka, they're too fast. They shouldn't be this fast." "They were ready," Koshka said, her rifle already folded and halfway into its drag bag. She moved with an economy of motion, a brutal efficiency. There was no panic, only process. The decoy failed. This was Plan B. Pack, now. Another whoomp, closer, 200 meters. The floor vibrated. "We have to get out," Lynx said, his voice climbing. "Exfil. We call for exfil." "We move to OP2. Koshka cut him off, her voice a flat, hard line. She slung her pack. "Rat line, go." "That's inside the factory. Koshka, they'll box us in. We need to be outside. We need to run." "You run. You're dead," she snapped. "They have drones up. They have counter-snipers sweeping every exit. They want us to run." She shoved a captured enemy radio into his chest. "Monitor this. I lead." She didn't wait for his reply. She plunged into the factory's dark interior, moving away from the light, away from the obvious. The rat line was a route she'd mapped during the first night. A series of collapsed floors, ventilation shafts, and crawl spaces that led down 2 levels and across to the factory's southern wing. A third whoomp, a direct hit on the floor above them. The world exploded in noise and pressure. Plaster and rebar rained down. Lynx screamed as the shock wave threw him against a wall. Koshka grabbed the front of his vest, hauling him to his feet. "Breathe," she commanded. "They have our last position. They do not have our new one. Move." She dragged him into a narrow maintenance corridor. The air was thick with asbestos and the smell of old machinery. They were moles buried in the enemy's backyard. The sounds of the hunt were muffled now. Shouts, the pop of small arms, the relentless thud of the mortars walking their fire across the building's roof. They were shelling a ghost. Lynx was shaking, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Koshka pushed him into a concrete recess and held up her fist. "Stop," she needed to hear. The enemy radio in Lynx's hand crackled. A frantic, high-pitched voice flooded the tiny speaker, unfiltered by encryption. Russian, panicked. "Comms operator is gone. A single shot. Through the glass. Bože moj, the window is... He's gone." A deeper voice barked back. "Report. Prizrak. Ghost. Did you see the flash?" "Nothing. No flash, no sound, just... gone. The mortars are hitting an empty floor. Jego ne suszczestwuje." The last line hung in the dusty air between them. "He's not real." Lynx stared at Koshka, his eyes wide in the gloom. A slow, cold understanding settled over Koshka. It was a feeling more potent than adrenaline. They weren't just hunting her. They weren't just afraid of her. They didn't think she was real. They thought she was a myth, a ghost in the wires, an avenging spirit. This fear was a weapon. It was a shield. The mortars weren't just an attempt to kill her. They were an act of desperation, an attempt to prove to themselves that the thing hunting them could, in fact, be killed. Her anonymity was her armor. "They're terrified," Lynx whispered, a new, strange tone in his voice. "Good," Koshka said. She took the radio. "Let's give the ghost a new home." They moved again, reaching the secondary OP. It was a hellish spot, a collapsed stairwell, cold, wet, and smelling of urine. The view was worse, partially obstructed by a dead crane, but it was safe. Koshka settled in, her frustration with the position growing. She laid out her mat, her movements stiff from the cold. She scanned the area with her binos, trying to find a clean line of sight. Lynx set up his own gear, his movements surer now. The panic was gone, replaced by a grim focus. "Koshka," he said, his voice low. "This angle, it's terrible. I can't see the front of the blue structure." "I know," she said, sweeping the area. "But look at what we can see." Her binoculars were focused on the back of the blue structure. From their previous OP, it had been invisible. From here, she could see a thick black data cable, newly laid, snaking out of a reinforced conduit. It ran from the building across a 20-meter gap and disappeared underground into a reinforced concrete bunker, disguised as a pile of rubble. "That's not a pile of rubble," Lynx breathed, his scope finding it. "That's a command bunker, a new one." Koshka's lips pulled into a thin, grim line. "Grom isn't in the building. He's under it, and we just knocked on his door." The new position was a compromise that satisfied no one. It was secure, but strategically blind. "I have no angle," Koshka said, her voice a low growl of frustration. She shifted, trying to get her optic to clear a rusted girder. "The bunker entrance is completely obscured. I can see the cable, but not the door." "We wait for dark," Lynx said. His voice was flat, resigned. He was huddled behind a concrete pillar, the adrenaline from the mortar strike leaving him cold and depleted. "We wait. We move. We get a new angle. It's the only safe play." "Safe doesn't finish the mission," Koshka said. She wasn't looking at him. She was studying the factory's eastern wing, a collapsed skeleton of rebar and concrete slabs 80 meters away. It was a death trap, but it had the angle. Look. She tapped his shoulder, forcing him to raise his scope. East wing, 3rd floor, the gap in the wall. That's our shot. It looks right down on the bunker. Lynx focused. He was silent for a long moment. Koshka, that's 80 meters, across the central courtyard, in daylight. They're hunting us. They'll have eyes on that courtyard. It's a kill zone. It's suicide. It's the mission. Grom will be there tonight. He'll be there tomorrow, Lynx argued, his voice pleading. We just wait. We're cold, we're wet, but we're alive. Don't do this. Koshka lowered her binoculars. She finally looked at him. His nerve was gone. He was running on fumes, his discipline eroded by the cold and the mortars. He wasn't thinking like a warrior. He was thinking like a survivor. She knew that Grom, having just had his C2 hit, would be moving. He would either relocate or double down on his assault. The window of opportunity was not hours, it was minutes. Her quiet fortitude had been about enduring the wait. Now, it had to become about forcing the action. He's right, she said, her voice quiet. It is a kill zone. Lynx sagged, a small sigh of relief escaping him. Good. So we wait. Pack your essentials. Radio, databook, optic, water. Leave the rest. We move in 2 minutes? Lynx's head snapped up. What? You just said... I said you were right. It's a kill zone, which is why they won't be looking for movement inside it. They're looking for runners exiting the factory. They're not looking for ghosts running from one shadow to the next. Koshka, no, that's insane. The mission is the mission, Lynx. We don't get to choose the terms. She was already stripping her pack, her movements economical and brutal. She was taking her rifle, 3 magazines, her sidearm, and the radio. Nothing else. I go first, she said. She was at the edge of the shadow, peering into the terrible open space. The white sky felt vast, an accusing eye. Time my run. When I make the far side, you follow. Use my exact path. 8 steps to the rebar pile. Slide. 6 steps to the overturned truck. Roll. Got it? Lynx was frozen, his face pale. This is a failure. This is how we die. Koshka turned to him. Her eyes were flat, devoid of sympathy. If we stay here, we fail. If we run, we die. If we move, we might win. Get ready. She didn't wait for his Wilco. She didn't give him time to argue, to let the fear paralyze him completely. She took a breath, held it. 3, 2, 1. She exploded from the darkness. The sudden daylight was a physical blow. The air felt too thin. The thud of her own boots on the frozen rubble was a cannonade. 8 steps. The sky was full of enemy eyes. She could feel them, hundreds of them, boring into her back. Slide. She hit the rebar pile, the metal tearing at her trousers. She didn't feel it. 6 steps. The overturned truck. Roll. She was in shadow again, her lungs burning, her heart a trapped bird against her ribs. She made it. She looked back, raising her hand. Lynx was still in the doorway, a statue of indecision. Lynx, move! She screamed over the radio, breaking her own noise discipline. The shout, or the terror of being left behind, broke his paralysis. He bolted, a clumsy, desperate sprint. He forgot the count. He ran straight, a perfect target. A single shot cracked the air, not from a rifle, a pop from the blue structure. Drone! Lynx shrieked, tumbling into the rebar beside her. Koshka, an Orlan, it's coming! Koshka looked up. The Orlan 10 drone was a gray predator, its electric whine already audible, its optic gimbal turning, zeroing in on their heat signature. They were caught. Then don't move, Koshka breathed. The words were barely a puff of air. Don't breathe. The Orlan 10's electric whine was a dentist's drill in her skull. It circled once, a lazy predator assessing its kill. They were pinned, half submerged in a crater of icy rubble and snowmelt, their thermal blankets lost in the desperate sprint. They were two warm bodies in a landscape of cold stone. They were beacons. Koshka forced her body into the slurry. The water, sharp as needles, soaked through her trousers, stealing all warmth. She pressed her face into the muck, the smell of rust and frozen mud filling her nostrils. She became part of the wreckage. Beside her, Lynx was a vibrating knot of terror. His breathing was shallow, fast. Puff, puff, puff. Each exhalation was a plume of white steam, a tiny flag signaling, "I am here, I am alive." The drone's whine changed pitch, growing deeper, louder. It was descending, hovering. It was right above them. Koshka could feel the rotor wash, a faint, cold breeze stirring the hair at her neck. This was the ultimate test. Not the run, not the shot, but this. The absolute agonizing inaction, the fortitude to lie still while death itself hovered 50 meters above, searching. Lynx couldn't take it. The pressure, the cold, the proximity, it broke him. He shifted, a small, convulsive movement, trying to burrow deeper, his breath hitched in a suppressed sob, exploding from his mouth in a cloud. The drone's optic gimbal whirred, swiveling. It had seen. Koshka moved. It was not a decision. It was an instinct. She grabbed Lynx's arm, her gloved fingers digging into his bicep like a vice. Her other hand clamped over his mouth, smashing his face down into the mud. It was a silent, violent, desperate command. Do not move, or I will kill you here. He froze, the shock of her attack momentarily overriding his panic. The drone hung there. Koshka counted the seconds. Each one was a lifetime. The cold was no longer a sensation. It was an entity, a living thing inside her, slowing her blood, numbing her mind. She focused only on the sound of the drone. She tried to match her own internal rhythm to its electric pulse, to will herself invisible, to become cold stone. 10 seconds. The gimbal whirred again. 15 seconds. The whine remained constant. It was studying them. It knew. 20 seconds. She prepared for the whump of the Vogue grenade. She tensed, ready to shield Lynx with her own body. A final, futile act. The pitch changed. The whine grew higher, thinner. It was ascending. It moved on, drifting lazily toward the south, continuing its patrol pattern. The operator, bored or unconvinced, had dismissed their heat signature as a pocket of steam, a glitch in the rubble. Koshka did not move. She held Lynx down for a full minute after the sound had faded. Then another. Then 5 more. The silence of the courtyard returned, heavier than before. Only then did she release her grip. She rolled onto her back, her chest aching. She was soaked. The cold was now a serious, mission-threatening enemy. They had survived, but the price was high. Lynx was sobbing quietly, his face slick with mud and tears. He was broken. "Get up," Koshka whispered, her own voice thick, her jaw stiff with cold. "Get to the building." They were compromised. They were half frozen, but they were alive. She dragged herself to the base of the eastern wing, and from this new, terrible position, she put her binoculars to her eyes. The world swam into view. Lynx crawled beside her, setting up his scope on unsteady hands. He aimed it at the bunker. His voice was a broken croak. "Koshka, I have Dvornik, a guard. Heavy armor, padded uniform. He's at the bunker entrance. This is it." Time in the new position was measured in shivers. The eastern wing was a wind tunnel. The sun, a weak and distant friend, offered no warmth, only a flat, gray light that made the rubble look even more desolate. They were soaked. The run, the drone, the icy water, it had leached the heat from their bones. Koshka's hands, even in her gloves, were numb. She had to consciously force her fingers to curl, to maintain a feel for the rifle's cold metal. Movement, Lynx whispered. His voice was raw, his earlier panic replaced by a hollowed-out automaton's focus. Koshka didn't move her head. Log it. Guard. He's just pacing, smoking again. Hours crawled by. 1, 2. The heavy-set guard at the bunker entrance paced his small, boring circuit. He was replaced by another. The rhythm of the base, the trucks, the patrols, continued, but the bunker itself remained sealed, silent. Doubt was a colder, sharper thing than the ice in her boots. It seeped into her mind. You moved for nothing. You risked Lynx's life. You compromised the mission for an angle on a closed door. The memory of Kharkiv returned. The weight. The conviction that she saw a command element. The shot. The immediate, devastating artillery response. The orange fire against the snow. The wrong call. The cost. She forced the image away. She focused on the pain in her left knee where she'd struck the rebar. She analyzed it. A dull throb. Not broken, just bruised. She focused on the numbness in her feet. She wiggled her toes, one by one, forcing the blood to move. She was not Olena. She was Koshka. She was a machine built to wait. This is a bust, Lynx murmured, his teeth chattering. Exfil window opens in 24 hours. We're not going to last that long, Koshka. Not like this. We have to... Quiet, she commanded, her voice barely audible. It was not a sound she heard, but a feeling, a vibration in the concrete beneath her. Low, growling, diesel. It wasn't a truck. It was heavier. A BTR-82A, painted in the dirty green and brown of the front lines, rolled into view. It didn't go to the checkpoint. It drove straight for the bunker, its 30mm cannon pointed aggressively at the sky. It stopped, engine idling, churning blue smoke into the gray air. The bunker guard snapped to attention, crushing his cigarette under his boot. Koshka. Lynx's voice was suddenly sharp, the cold forgotten. This is it. Security detail. The side hatch of the BTR opened. 2 soldiers jumped out, fanning out, their rifles up. They scanned the factory. Koshka didn't breathe. She was part of the concrete, a gargoyle of ice and patience. Then, he emerged. He didn't climb out. He stepped out, with the unhurried arrogance of a man who owned the ground he walked on. He was tall, wearing an immaculate gray polkovnik's ushanka. He barked an order, and one of the guards flinched. He walked to the bunker door, pulling off his gloves. Koshka's optic was on him. She saw the 2 stars, Divyaz Vyazdi, on his shoulder boards. He matched the file photo. The gait, the arrogant tilt of the head, the doubt, the cold, the memory of Kharkiv. It all vanished. It burned away in a sudden, clean, white-hot spike of adrenaline. Her world, which had been a gray, aching blur, snapped into perfect, crystalline focus. Her breathing slowed. Her heart beat once, hard, and then settled into a slow, powerful rhythm. Her body forgot the cold. There was no factory. There was no wind. There was only the mathematics. Range, she whispered. Lynx was already there. His voice was a low, steady hum, all traces of fear gone, replaced by pure professionalism. Range, 650, 650, wind, 9 o'clock, steady. Call it 4 clicks. No mirage. It's a clean hold. He paused. Target confirmed, Koshka. It's Grom. The crosshairs found the gap between the man's neck and his body armor. Her finger slid from the frame to the trigger. The 2.1 kilograms of pressure. The world compressed to the few millimeters of pull. Grom was in her sights. He was hers. He turned, reaching back toward the open hatch of the BTR, as if helping someone else. The world was a 10x magnification circle. In it, Polkovnik Grom, the man she had crawled through hell to find, turned his back to her. He was reaching into the BTR. Koshka's finger tightened, taking up the first stage slack of the trigger. The 2.1 kilogram break was all that separated Grom from oblivion. Koshka, he's turning, he's exposed. Lynx's voice was a low, urgent hum. Send it now. But Grom was helping someone out. A second man emerged. He did not look like a soldier. He wore a clean, new-issue uniform with no mud, no wear. His rank was indeterminate, but his insignia was that of the Electronic Warfare, EW, troops. He carried a hardened, tactical briefcase. He was thin, pale, and looked annoyed by the cold. Grom, the two-star polkovnik, deferred to him. The colonel pointed at the blue structure, then at the bunker. The new man shook his head, gesturing impatiently, tapping his briefcase. The crosshairs, which had been locked on Grom's spine, drifted. They moved 1 centimeter, settling on the center mass of the new man. Koshka's mind was no longer a sniper's. It was an analyst's. It was racing. The HF signal burst. The radio operator. The new heavy data cable. The failure of the decoy. The immediate mortar response. The drone. It all connected. The enemy wasn't just reacting well. They were seeing well. Their command and control was superior. And this man, the one Grom treated like a superior, was the reason. Koshka, what are you waiting for? Lynx's whisper was frantic. The shot is perfect. Send it! He saw the HVT, the one in the briefing book. Koshka saw the system. Grom was the fist. This new man, this pale technician, was the brain. Killing Grom would disrupt the coming assault. Killing this man would blind it. It would sever the nerve, rendering the fist useless. Her ROE was explicit. Positive identification required for HVT Grom. Her orders were to kill the polkovnik. Her commander's intent, the unspoken mission objective, was to disrupt enemy offensive capabilities. He's the target, Lynx, Koshka whispered, her mind made up. Yes, Grom! He's right there! No, the other one, the one with the case. A beat of absolute confused silence. What? Koshka, that's not... We don't have authorization. We don't even know who he is. My order is to spot for Grom. I am designating a new high-value target, Koshka said, her voice dropping into a formal monotone, the voice of command. Call sign, Script. He is the EW chief. The target package is now Grom and Script. Priority is Script. She was a sergeant, rewriting a mission authorized by a general. The weight of the decision was immense. The memory of Kharkiv, the wrong call, the fire, threatened to shake her hand. But this was not a guess. This was a conclusion. Her intellectual fortitude, the hours of silent, thankless observation, had shown her the truth. She saw the system, not just the man. Koshka, you can't, Lynx protested. I can take them both, she interrupted, calculating. If they line up, if Script moves left. Grom and Script were in an animated, angry discussion. Grom pointed at the factory, at them. Script shook his head, pointing at the sky, then at his console. He was the only one who understood the ghost. He knew they weren't dead. The window was closing. The adrenaline of the moment, the cold, the pressure from Lynx. It all screamed at her to just shoot. Take Grom. Fulfill the order. She refused. It was the harder choice. The silent, non-compliant choice. She would wait for the real prize. Then, the worst possible thing happened. The argument ended. Grom, in a fit of pique, gestured sharply at the bunker. The bunker guard scrambled to open the heavy steel door. Script adjusted his briefcase. Grom turned. "Koshka, they're moving! They're going inside!" Lynx's voice was breaking. "Shoot! Shoot someone!" The crosshairs tracked them. Grom stepped in front of Script, blocking the shot. Koshka had a perfect angle on the HVT she was ordered to kill, and a completely obstructed view of the HVT she knew she must. She held her fire. The two men stepped through the doorway. The steel door swung shut with a dull, final thud. They were gone. The shot was gone. The opportunity was gone. Silence. The idling of the BTR was the only sound. Lynx lowered his spotting scope. He didn't look at her. He stared at the concrete floor. "Damn it, Koshka," he whispered, his voice hollow, all the fire gone. "We lost them. We lost everything. Koshka, say something." Lynx's voice was a ragged tear in the silence. Koshka said nothing. Her eye was still pressed to the optic, the crosshairs resting on the steel door that had swallowed their mission. She was calculating, processing, ignoring the acidic burn of failure. The BTR was still there. The guards were still there. The targets were not. "You hesitated," Lynx accused, his voice rising from despair to a sharp, bitter anger. "We had him. I gave you the solution. We had Grom, the primary HVT, the one we crawled through this for, and you watched." "The package changed," Koshka said, her voice flat. She was scanning the bunker, looking for a flaw, a ventilation port, a power conduit, anything. The steel door was impenetrable. The concrete was reinforced. It was a tomb. "The package. You changed the package. You designated a new target with zero intel and let the real one walk." He was losing it. The cold and the fear and the failure cresting into a wave of insubordination. "We're done here. We're compromised, we're half frozen, and we have nothing." "We are not done," Koshka said, her patience, her quiet fortitude wearing thin, not from the enemy, but from her own partner. "They are in the bunker. They are still in the AO. Hold this position. Monitor the door." "For what? For them to leave? We've already lost the shot. I am finding a new one." She slid back from the rifle, her body aching from the cold. She moved to the edge of their hide, a jagged gap in the concrete wall. The angle was still wrong. She needed to be higher, or farther left. "Koshka, stop!" Lynx pleaded. "Just stop. We failed. Let's just try to get home." His words, meant to be conciliatory, were an insult. Home. The word was an obscenity here. It revealed the fracture between them. He was thinking of survival. She was thinking of the mission. "You lost your nerve, Lynx," she said. It was not an accusation. It was a diagnosis. It was also a mistake. Lynx's face contorted. The blood rushed back to his frost-nipped skin. "I lost my nerve? I followed you across that kill zone. I lay here while a drone tried to kill us. I had the target. You choked." He pushed himself up. "You want a new angle? Fine, I'll get you a new angle." "Lynx, hold," Koshka commanded, her voice a sharp crack. "Do not move from this position." But he was already moving, fueled by a reckless, angry energy. He half-crawled, half-limped toward the other side of their collapsed floor, trying to get a line of sight around the central pillar. "I can see. If I can just get past this rebar." He was off his mat. He was off his discipline. He was noise. He shifted his weight, planting his boot on what he thought was a solid piece of flooring. It was a loose sheet of corrugated metal, half hidden by plaster dust. The screech of metal on concrete was not a sound. It was a physical violation. It ripped the silence of the courtyard apart. It was louder than a gunshot, more revealing than a muzzle flash. It was a catastrophic, unrecoverable error. In the 80 meters of open air, the sound echoed, bounced off the blue structure, and seemed to hang in the air for an eternity. Koshka closed her eyes. 1 second, the memory of Kharkiv, the mortars, the screams. It wasn't a memory. It was a prophecy. It's happening again. Lynx was frozen, his face a mask of pure, childlike horror. He knew what he had done. The BTR's heavy machine gun, which had been pointing skyward, whirred as its turret began to traverse. It was aiming directly at their building. A dog, somewhere near the bunker, began to bark frantically. Then, a spotlight, powerful and white, snapped on from the bunker's roof. It lanced through the gloom, hitting the factory wall, sweeping across the floors. "Koshka," Lynx whispered, his voice broken, all the anger gone, replaced by a terrible final understanding. "Drone, FPV, I hear it." Koshka heard it too. Not the high-altitude whine of the Orlan. This was a new sound, a high-pitched, furious, like a swarm of angry hornets. It was coming from the blue structure, and it was coming fast. The whine was not a sound. It was a physical presence. It was the sound of inevitable, incoming death, and it was getting louder every millisecond. The spotlight pinned them, two insects in a beam of harsh, accusing white. Lynx was frozen, whispering a low, desperate, "No, no, no," his body locked in the paralysis of his mistake. Then the BTR opened up. The heavy 14.5mm machine gun wasn't precise. It was brutal. Thud, 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 thud. Heavy rounds hammered the concrete facade of their building, a steel-fisted hand beating the wall, trying to pin them, to keep them in place for the real killer. Koshka's mind, usually a cold engine of calculation, was a void of white static. There was no math for this, no windage, no ROE. This was not war. It was extermination. The drone appeared. It zipped through a broken window on the floor below and shot up into their space. A black, four-rotored cross, impossibly fast. Its W's... A shriek that filled her skull. She could see the warhead strapped to its belly. An RPG-7 round, enough to turn their concrete hide into a grave. It hovered for a fraction of a second, its digital eye locking onto their heat. It was 20 meters away. It was coming. Lynx screamed. In that half-second, Koshka's training, her core, took over. It was not a thought. It was an act. Her eyes darted, not to the drone, but to the floor. To the spot where Lynx had almost fallen before, a jagged, dark hole where the concrete had rotted away, eaten by years of snow and ice. A 10-foot drop to the darkness of the floor below. She didn't weigh options. She didn't call a warning. She shoved Lynx. It was a brutal, full-body impact, a cross-body check that lifted him off his feet. "Go! Go!" she screamed. The words ripped from her throat. Lynx, his balance already gone, stumbled backward. He flailed, his eyes wide with shock, and vanished into the hole. A cry, cut short by the thud of his impact below. The drone, its logic momentarily confused by the sudden split in targets, adjusted, its whine pitched higher. It was coming for her. The bigger heat signature, the one still moving. Koshka didn't try to follow. There was no time. She ripped her AK-74U from its sling. The short-barreled rifle felt like a child's toy. Her .338, her instrument of precision, was useless. This was a moment for rage. She stood up, fully exposed in the spotlight. She made herself the target. She brought the rifle to her shoulder, flipped the selector to full auto, and squeezed the trigger. Pop, 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 pop. The small caliber rounds were pathetic, swallowed by the noise of the incoming drone and the hammering of the BTR. Tracers zipped harmlessly past the fast-moving black shape. The world narrowed to that single angry dot. She knew she couldn't hit it. It was a futile, desperate act. But it wasn't about hitting it. It was about making it detonate. Make it see her. Make it explode here. Not down there where Lynx was. It was the last, logical act. A final, protective command. Look at me. Come for me. The drone did not flinch. It was a machine. It had its target. It slammed into the concrete pillar 2 feet from her head. The world went white. A flash of impossible, searing magnesium that burned her retinas. Then, pressure. A physical fist of air that crushed her chest, punched the breath from her lungs, and lifted her from the ground. She was thrown backward, a rag doll of Kevlar and bone slamming into the far wall. Then, only the sound. A vast, all-consuming, high-pitched rhinug. Then, the concrete, the rebar, and the ceiling came down. Then, nothing. The ringing was the first thing. A single, sustained, high-frequency ee that occupied her entire universe. Consciousness returned not as a light, but as a series of dull, blunt sensations. Pain, a hot, wet fire in her left calf. Weight, a heavy slab of concrete across her chest, pinning her. Taste, concrete dust, cordite, and the metallic tang of her own blood. Smell, ozone, burnt hair. Koshka's eyes snapped open. The world was black. She was buried. Panic, cold, and suffocating rose in her throat. She was trapped. She was going to die here in the dark, choking on dust. The memory of Kharkiv, the fire, the screams. No. She forced the panic down, compressing it into a tiny, hard knot. She replaced it with process. Assess. She could move her right arm. Her left was pinned. She could move her right leg. Her left was trapped, the source of the fire. Breathe. The air was thick with dust, but it was air. She wasn't sealed in. She pushed with her free arm and leg. The slab didn't budge. It was too heavy. She was not a sniper. She was not a soldier. She was just meat, trapped under rock. Failed. The word echoed in the ringing silence. She had failed the mission. She had failed to protect her partner. Lynx. The image of him falling through the hole. The thud. He was dead. She had shoved him to his death. Her final act was a failure. Just like Kharkiv, she had killed another partner. The thought did not bring despair. It brought a cold, clarifying rage. She stopped pushing against the slab. She changed the angle. She dug at the rubble around her pinned arm, creating space, one handful of gravel at a time. It took minutes. It felt like hours. The ringing in her ears was her only companion. Her arm came free. With 2 arms, she pushed. The slab shifted just a centimeter. Enough. She wormed her way out from under it, a snake shedding its skin. Her left leg came free with a slick sound and a fresh explosion of white-hot agony. She was out. She lay on her back in the darkness, gasping, her body a map of new pain. The world was not black. It was dark. Above, a single gray patch of sky, viewed through the hole the drone had made. The BTR had stopped firing. The spotlight was gone. "Lynx," she whispered. Her voice was a dry rasp. Nothing. Only the ee. She pushed herself up. Her leg screamed. She looked down. A shard of rebar, propelled by the blast, was embedded in her calf, just below the knee. It was a dark, ugly thing. She didn't touch it. She fumbled for her radio. The antenna was snapped. The unit was dead. She found her 338. It was half buried in plaster. She pulled it free. The stock was cracked. The optic, her beautiful, precise instrument. The glass was a spiderweb of shattered crystal. Useless. She was unarmed, wounded, alone, and she had failed. She crawled toward the hole she had shoved him through. I have to see. I have to know. The drop was 10 feet into a black pit of debris. She couldn't see the bottom. "Lynx!" she called, louder this time. A sound, a low, wet groan. It wasn't the wind, it wasn't the ringing, it was human. He was alive. Her mission objective, her quiet fortitude, her identity as the ghost. It all dissolved in that single sound. The strategic patience was gone. The cold calculation was gone. All that remained was a raw animal instinct. Get him back. She rolled, ignoring the fire in her leg, and dropped into the hole. She landed hard on her good leg, her body screaming. The darkness here was total. It smelled of rot and damp. "Lynx, talk to me. Where are you?" Koshka." His voice was a weak, thready thing, barely recognizable. I can't." She followed the sound. He was 10 meters away, slumped against a rusted machine. She fumbled for the small flashlight on her plate carrier. The beam cut the dark. He was a mess. His face was caked in blood and dust. But his eyes were open. He was conscious. "Assess," she commanded, her voice dropping back into the familiar cadence of procedure. It calmed her. "Where are you hit?" My leg," he gasped. It's bad, Koshka. I felt it pop." She aimed the light. His left leg was bent at a sickening, unnatural angle below the knee. Shrapnel from the blast, punching through the rotten floor, had torn through his thigh. Dark, pulsing blood soaked his trousers. Arterial. She was no longer a sniper. She was a rescuer. The mission had changed. Again. "Okay, Lynx," she said, her voice impossibly calm. "We're getting out of this. But first, this is going to hurt." She grabbed the tourniquet from his own plate carrier. "Bite down!" He screamed as she cinched it high and tight on his thigh, twisting the windlass until the bleeding stopped, and his scream turned into a gasping sob. She fumbled for his radio. It was still on his vest. The antenna was bent, but intact. She clicked the transmit button. Static. "Sova, this is Koshka. Do you read?" Only static, but it was live static, not the dead silence of her own. "It's damaged," she muttered. "Short range only." She looked at Lynx, pale and shivering on the edge of shock. She looked at her own ruined leg. They were in a hole, unarmed, with a radio that couldn't reach command. As she processed this, a new sound from outside reached her. The thrum of diesel engines. Plural. She crawled to a crack in the wall. Grom and script. They were emerging from the bunker, climbing into the BTR and a second Tiger vehicle. They thought the ghost was dead. They thought they had won. They were preparing to leave, the world compressed to the diesel thrum of the BTR's engine. Grom and script were leaving. The entire mission, the crawl, the cold, the run, the blast, it was all evaporating in a cloud of blue exhaust. Koshka frantically worked the radio, jamming the transmit button. Sova, this is Koshka. Do you copy? Priority traffic." Only the hiss of static answered. The blast, the concrete, the rebar, they were in a Faraday cage. The signal was trapped. Beside her, Lynx coughed, a wet, rattling sound. His skin was the color of ash. Shock. "Koshka," he whispered, his eyes unfocused, staring at the concrete ceiling. "I'm cold." Two choices, a perfect, terrible binary. One, get Lynx. He was her partner, her responsibility. She could drag him deeper into the factory's warren, find a hole, hide, wait for the extraction window, prioritize personnel, survive. Two, the mission. Grom and Script, the fist and the brain, were 100 meters away. If they drove off, the assault they were planning would happen. Thousands would die. She had to get the signal out, prioritize the mission, win. She looked at Lynx, his breath fogging in the beam of her flashlight. She looked through the crack at the BTR, its rear hatch slamming shut. She was a sniper. The shot was everything. She had failed to take her shot. But she had not been given a shot. She had been given a strike. The intel she possessed, the location of those two men together, was more powerful than any 338 round. The mission was not the shot. The mission was the result. "Koshka," Lynx mumbled. He was delirious, his mind back in the OP before the drone. His eyes found hers, unseeing. "Koshka, DVI Zvyozdy, 2 stars. He's static. Send it." His words were a ghost. They were the echo from the cold open, the moment she had hesitated, the moment she had identified Script. He was trapped in the instant of their failure. Send it. His delirious command was her absolution. It was her order. He had made the choice for her. She would not save her partner. She would save the mission. "I will, Lynx," she whispered, her voice thick. "I will." She checked his tourniquet. Still tight. She took his radio. She took his remaining morphine auto-injector and jammed it into her own thigh, not for the pain, but for the clarity. The rebar in her calf was a distant, dull fire. The synthetic adrenaline hit her system like a jolt of electricity. "Sova, Koshka, do you read?" She yelled into the handset, crawling back toward the hole she'd fallen through. Static. Of course. The signal was trapped down here. She looked up. Through the jagged, smoking hole the drone had created. Up there, in the open, in the wreckage of their old hide, exposed to the sky. She had to go back up. "Koshka, no," Lynx breathed, a moment of clarity breaking through his haze. He saw her looking up. He understood. "It's a kill zone. They're watching." "I know." She grabbed the front of his vest. He grunted in pain. "We're going with it." "No, leave me, go, go." "We stay together," she grunted. She was no longer a sniper. She was an animal, fueled by morphine and a single, brutal objective. She began to drag him, 100 kilos of man and gear, across the rubble-strewn floor, back toward the hole. Every pull was agony. Her legs screamed, her lungs burned, Lynx groaned, half-conscious. The BTR's engine revved, the Tiger's headlights flashed. They were moving. No, not yet. Not yet. She reached the base of the collapsed floor. She had to get up 10 feet, wounded, dragging a man into the line of fire. It was impossible, but it was the mission. There was no thought, only heave, grip, and pull. Koshka hooked her arms under Lynx's plate carrier. She pushed with her one good leg. The rebar in her calf tore at the muscle, a white-hot, sickening grind. The morphine barely touched it. It was a distant, secondary pain. The primary pain was the sound of the BTR's engine revving. Heave. Lynx groaned, a wet, terrible sound. Grip. Her gloves, slick with her own blood, slipped on his vest. Pull. She moved one foot, then another. She was dragging him up a slope of broken concrete and twisted rebar, back toward the hole. back toward the sky, back toward the enemy's guns. Every instinct, every lesson in survival she had ever learned, screamed at her. Hide. Go deep, go dark. You are wounded, you are exposed. The BTR's gearbox clanked. It was in gear, it was starting to roll. No, the rage, the adrenaline, and the morphine combined. She roared, a soundless, animalistic act of will, and pulled. She was a machine. She was the mother dragging her child from a fire. She was no longer a ghost. She was a physical, desperate, and wounded animal. She reached the edge of the hole. Above was the gray, indifferent sky, and the BTR's spotlight, now sweeping the factory, hunting for survivors. Shouts. Russian. From the ground floor, a sweep team, drawn by the drone's explosion, was inside the factory. They were coming up. She had seconds, not minutes. "Lynx," she gasped. "I'm sorry." She shoved him first, rolling him onto the open, blasted floor above. He landed with a heavy, broken thud and lay still, a heap in the open. Koshka grabbed a piece of rebar and hauled herself up. Her ruined leg left a dark, wet smear on the concrete. She was up. She was out. The wind hit her. The world was vast and cold. The spotlight from the BTR swept past, lancing the darkness 20 meters to her left. The diesel fumes were thick in her throat. The BTR was 100 meters away, moving. The tiger was right behind it. She crawled to Lynx. She grabbed his radio. She shielded his body with hers. She pressed the transmit button. "Sova, this is Koshka. Do you copy? I have a priority fire mission. Broken." The static was deafening. The signal was fighting the concrete, the rebar, the distance. "Broken arrow! I repeat, broken arrow!" The BTR was picking up speed. The sweep team was on the floor below them, shouting, "Koshka, Sova!" A voice, thin as a razor, cut through the static. "I copy. Bro, send traffic." Tears of relief or pain froze on her cheeks. She was exposed. She was in the open. She was wounded, but she was heard. "Fire mission, danger close!" she screamed into the handset, her voice cracking. "Grid 4-9 Alpha, target package, 2 vehicles, BTR, Tiger, HVT, Grom, and Script. Send everything, send it now!" The BTR was at the crossroads, 150 meters. "Sova, Koshka, did you copy?" The sweep team's flashlights played on the ceiling below them. They were at the stairs. A pause. An eternity of ringing ears and revving engines. "Sova copies," the voice returned, impossibly calm. "Good copy. Danger close confirmed. Grid 4-9 Alpha. Package is Grom and Script. Solution is airborne. Godspeed, Koshka. Shot. Over." Solution is airborne, not artillery. HIMARS. Rockets. The line clicked dead. Koshka dropped the radio. It was done. She looked at the BTR, now turning onto the road, about to be safe. She looked at the hole where the shouts were getting closer. She could not run. Her leg was destroyed. Lynx was unconscious. She did not try. Her quiet fortitude had been about patience, about the refusal to act. Now, it was about the refusal to move. It was the strength to wait, to see the mission through to its final, fiery punctuation. She crawled on top of Lynx, covering his head and torso with her own body. She pulled her helmet down low. She closed her eyes and tasted the ash in the air. She had called fire on her own position. She was the unseen overwatch, and this was her final, unseen act. She waited. For 1 second, there was only the rumble of the BTR and the clink of the soldiers below. Then, the air changed. A sound from above. Not a whine. Not a whoomp. A shriek. A sound like the sky tearing in half. The HIMARS scream. It was the sound of righteous mathematical vengeance. Koshka didn't flinch. She just held Lynx tighter. The world dissolved. The air became fire. The pressure wave hit them, a physical crushing blow, infinitely stronger than the drones. The ground heaved. The sound was not a sound. It was the end of all sound. The flash was blinding, even through her closed eyelids. The BTR, the Tiger, Grom, Script, the crossroads, and a 50-meter radius around them vaporized. The shockwave rolled over their position, throwing rubble like confetti. Then, silence. A profound, absolute quiet, deeper even than the ringing in her ears. The silence was the most violent thing. The shriek of the rockets, the cataclysmic crack of their arrival, had punched a hole in the world, sucking all sound out with it. Now there was nothing. No BTR, no shouting, no drone. Even the ringing in her ears was gone, replaced by a thick, pressurized cotton. Koshka tasted sulfur and burnt diesel. She was lying on her back. She had been thrown from Lynx. Lynx, she rolled, her body a single unified scream of pain. The morphine was gone. The rebar in her leg was a white-hot fire. She ignored it. He was where she had left him, a still, dark shape. She crawled, dragging her useless leg through the plaster dust. She put her hand on his neck, a pulse. Faint, thready, but it was there. He was breathing. She collapsed onto the concrete beside him. It was done. The pain returned, flooding the space the adrenaline had occupied. It was absolute. She looked at her leg. The wound was bad. She was losing blood. She had no more tourniquets. She lay on her back, her good hand on Lynx's chest, feeling the rise and fall. She looked up at the patch of gray sky through the hole in the ceiling. It had begun to snow. Gentle, silent flakes drifted down, landing on her face, melting on her hot skin. They were flakes of ash, then flakes of water. They were clean. She thought of the crossroads, the crater, the two men who were now just atoms, Grom and Script. She hadn't fired a single shot at them. Her rifle, its optic shattered, lay 10 feet away, a useless piece of steel. Her greatest victory was a 9-digit number spoken into a radio, an unseen overwatch, a ghost's whisper that had summoned the thunder. She heard a sound, a boot crunching on rubble. Her hand snapped to her sidearm, her fingers fumbling with the holster. The sweep team. They had survived the blast. Another crunch. A voice. Muffled, deep. Around this side. I have thermal. 2 signatures. They're weak. Ukrainian. Koshka let her head fall back onto the concrete. She released the grip on her pistol. The extraction team. The broken arrow call. They had come. A beam of light hit her face. A man in a Ukrainian helmet leaned over her, his face a mask of concern. His mouth was moving. She couldn't hear him. The world was still silent, packed with cotton. Another medic was on Lynx. He's alive. Tourniquet held. The first medic shone a light in her eyes. She didn't look at him. She looked past his shoulder, at the sky. She could see the pillar of black smoke rising from the crossroads, thick and oily even in the falling snow. It was over. Days later. A rear base, a concrete room smelling of gun oil and stale coffee. Koshka sat at a table, her left leg propped up on a chair, wrapped in a thick, clean bandage. She was assembling her new rifle. The optic was pristine. She clicked the windage turret, listening to the solid mathematical sound. The door opened. Lynx rolled himself in, his left leg gone below the knee, his wheelchair squeaking. He parked beside her, saying nothing. He just watched her work. A young intelligence lieutenant holding a tablet walked in. He looked too clean for this war. Sergeant Kovalenko, he said, not looking up from his screen. Just need to finalize the after action. We've been analyzing the enemy chatter post-strike. It's chaos. Koshka continued her work, wiping a cloth over the lens. The lieutenant read, "Intercepts from the 48th Army show a total collapse in their C2. The strike vaporized their entire sector command and their regional EW chief. The planned offensive in the Donbass. It's not delayed, it's evaporated. It's not happening." Lynx stared at his hands, folded in his lap. "The best part," the lieutenant continued, a note of academic curiosity in his voice, "is that they don't know what hit them. They blame a catastrophic friendly fire incident. The survivors, the ones who saw the drone, the ones who heard the shot from the factory, they're being discredited. Their superiors are convinced it was an inside job because the strike was too precise." He scrolled. "The frontline chatter is different, though. They're terrified. They're calling it the Prizrak, the ghost. They believe a single infiltrator, a ghost, walked into their base, pointed at their command, and made them disappear." He finally looked up. "They're still hunting for him." Koshka paused her wiping. She looked at Lynx. He met her gaze. It was the only acknowledgement they would ever need. The lieutenant, oblivious, made a final note. "Well, whoever he was, he saved the line. You're clear to return to non-combat duties, Sergeant? Once you're cleared." He left. Koshka returned to her optic. She picked up the turret cap. She aligned the threads, her movements precise, economical, and silent. She screwed it into place. A soft, final click. Weeks later, Koshka stood by the window of the rehabilitation center. The room was warm, sterile, and smelled of bleach. Below, supply trucks moved on a clean, paved road, a different universe from the mud and ash of the Zero Line. Her left leg, now a roadmap of surgical scars and grafted skin, ached with the damp weather. She no longer had a limp. She had a new, permanent, and deliberate gait. She had relearned her own center of gravity, accepting the deep, structural ache as a new variable in her life's equation. On the wall hung a large, updated tactical map of the Eastern Front. Her eyes traced it. Where Grom's offensive was meant to have torn a bloody hole, the red and blue lines were stagnant, frozen in the same configuration as the day of the strike. It was an absence, a stabilized sector. The door opened. The same young intelligence lieutenant from the debrief walked in, his boots clean, his tablet in hand. "Sergeant Kovalenko," he said, nodding. "Good to see you mobile. Your psych evals are cleared. Command is reassigning you." He gestured to the map with a pen, his pointer tapping the silent red line. "You know, the brass is still studying the Azot strike. It's become a legend. The single most effective counter-C2 operation of the quarter. The enemy in that sector, they're deaf and blind. The offensive didn't just stall, it imploded. All because that HIMARS strike was so damned perfect." Koshka just watched his pen tap the map. Deaf and blind. "We're awarding a medal, of course," he continued, flipping a page in his digital file. "Posthumously, to the spotter, Corporal Petrenko, a true hero." Koshka's blood, which she had thought frozen by the cold of the factory, went colder. "He's not dead." The lieutenant froze, his face flushing. "What? He's... Oh." He fumbled with the tablet. "My apologies. A clerical error. The report said total limb loss. It must have been misfiled. My God. Well, he's out then. Medically discharged." "Yes," Koshka said. The word was flat, hard, and final. "Right," the lieutenant said, clearing his throat. desperate to move on from his mistake. As for the operative, the one who called it in, the ghost, we're still trying to identify him. The extraction team that found you, their report states you were non-responsive, severely wounded, your comms shattered. They assumed you were just collateral damage, caught in the hunt for the real agent. Koshka looked from the map to the lieutenant's earnest, clean face and back to the map. She saw Lynx, pale in the flashlight's beam. She felt the shriek of the rockets in her bones. She smelled the ozone and the snow. The lieutenant held out a new, thin file. In the end, it doesn't matter who he was. The line held. Command wants you on the southern front. Same duty. Long-range reconnaissance. He paused. Unseen overwatch. She took the file. Her hand was perfectly steady. It's quiet down there, the lieutenant offered, as if to reassure her. For now. Koshka looked at the file, then back at the window. It always is, she said. Until it isn't. She turned, her new measured gait carrying her out of the room. The sound of her boots on the linoleum floor was firm, solid, and made almost no sound at all. The victory wasn't the medal. It wasn't the legend. The victory was the map. It was the red line that had not moved. It was the new file in her hand. The work was not done, and the quiet was the only reward.